So today I watched something and again different and yet again not quite incredibly different from mm, so um sci-fi and horror combined. In other words, is usually has potential. I mean, just depends on how it's made. Now I know the likes of Alien is really somehow highly regarded. I don't personally so think it's mostly. I mean, well, alright, it came out early on, so I'm not sure if it was a pioneer and such, but it's. What was though? There was that other Russian what was USSR movie, I think. One word, I forgot what it was. I prefer that. That was what I want to say. It had more existentialism and such. What was it called? What word was it? It inspired the opera sequence in the Memories anime. So anyway, I watched today something different though, something more similar to Alien and yet not quite so similar. Actually, I haven't seen anything specifically like this. So I mean, people call it derivative, but I haven't specifically seen. Obviously, it's derivative from other genres in general, but I haven't seen specifically, like spaceships and Mars and zombies as well. I mean, I mean, they were like zombies, but zombies are usually slower and such, aren't they? So I thought they were more like uh, infected with babies or something. I don't know. So yeah, it's called Last Days on Mars, and um, well, in terms of the horror that it was supposed to be about, and even I mean a bit of at the beginning, just at the beginning mostly, how it was quite interesting how they depicted the sand dunes and sandstorms specifically made it look like a tsunami or tide generally, and I thought they looked pretty cool somehow. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it didn't last long though. It's yeah, the whole thing began then the drama, the intensity, and then the infection. And this is the problem. So when it comes to well, a lot of horror, actually, tends to be the same thing. Unfortunately, this is a problem also with zombie films in general. They don't tend to be exactly the most interesting things ever. I always thought vampires were more interesting than zombies. So first, I have never seen a vampires in space somehow. I'm not sure. Maybe they're just earthbound, I suppose. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's still sort of better than zombies on Earth, I suppose. I mean, zombies are generally boring, and there's a lot of zombie movies somehow highly regarded. So I'm not entirely sure how they're so highly regarded and this one isn't, because I mean, adding spaceships and CGI generally, I suppose. It's kind of always better to look at than just zombies going into a mall and whatnot. I mean, sure, it's kind of funny to see zombies, in shops where normally normal people are, normal in inverted commas, but it's very mundane at any rate. I mean, the the other sci-fi that was somewhat similar, but not exactly similar. I mean, more original. I preferred it. That I watched was called Moon. Uh, but I watched it years ago, so I don't quite remember it very well. I remember the general story, just not the details. But I remember it had good cinematography as well. So sort of like this, with the exception of the zombies themselves. You don't exactly need the best of. Well, in fact, they didn't use much lighting at all. But in terms of the backgrounds though, and you know, apparently they used Jordan's deserts, and then they removed the plants to simulate Mars. Huh. So Jordan is Mars, interesting. Anyway, yeah. So, by the way, one other thing I found interesting is the the names they use don't exactly a lot. I mean, they used one name they kept on mentioning is Aurora, which is self-explanatory. It's self-referential, I suppose. It's kind of astronomical as well. Uh, the Aurora Borealis. Another one though that might have that people might not have noticed if they weren't familiar with Greek mythology is Tantalus, which wasn't mentioned as often as Aurora, but was mentioned a couple, 3 times maybe, which apparently was the spaceship itself. So I think the spaceship where they came from, or the mission in general, was called Tantalus, and and Aurora I think was some other spaceship. I think I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, and now Tantalus is a prisoner in the underworld in Greek mythology. So in this sense, it's sort of even though I mean we're talking astronomical here, so not exactly the underworld, but in the sense, you know, it's it's very much kind of like hell, especially when all hell breaks loose, so to say. And otherwise, if you're trapped there, then sure enough, it's practically hell, right? Yeah. Uh, Tantalus himself, obviously, though, wasn't Hades himself. Sometimes I make this error. I'm not sure why, but it's a very close association to Hades. Now, another one though that I know of. Actually, before I go to there, the interesting correlation between the Greek Tantalus and this movie, I thought. I'm not sure if anyone noticed it, but um, yeah, it is the fact that they got thirsty. Now, I know thirst is also a symptom of rabies, so but in a way, it's interesting how they combine. Rabies wasn't mentioned, but seeing how the so-called zombies reacted, I think it was more rabies than actually. I mean, rabies is an actual disease, so we're talking reality here. Most zombies, still stereotypically in media, are depicted as slow-moving. So they weren't quite zombies; they were much faster than conventional zombies. Incidentally, I'm not entirely sure why conventional slow-moving zombies are ever a threat, considering they're so slow-moving. Just jog along. Yeah. Anyway, so what's interesting is that the thirst is one of the symptoms, along with memory loss, which actually now I wonder. I'm not sure if memory loss is a rabies symptom. Let me check. I mean, it might be. It's quite all pervasive. I think it affects the yeah, it's by the Lassa virus, and it's absolutely awful. Yeah, the saliva, and it affects the central nervous system. Travels the peripheral nervous system, I think. Yeah. And I'm not sure. I don't think memory loss is actually. Um, it's very weird that salivation is one of the symptoms when thirst is. There's also fear of water, though. So um, hmm. Right. So I see. It's not quite. I don't. Doesn't seem like thirst is quite more more a fear of water, just a fear of water is this symptom. So maybe not. Um, yeah. Either way, I mean the zombies did kind of did act indeed like they did have rabies. Just not exactly conforms to everything else as well. I don't know. Um, yeah. So anyway, this what's interesting is that maybe this is absolutely awful. Yeah. What's interesting is that Tantalus, right? So it was called Tantalus. In fact, I think, I mean, if thirst isn't one of the main symptoms, yeah, seems like. Well, I mean, I'm assuming they have thirst like any other person, but maybe it's not quite the central symptom. Apparently, fear of water is more of the central symptom. Um, so, in other words, the Greek mythological figure of Tantalus so is more relevant because, indeed, thirst was a central thing with him, but he was punished by Zeus to forever go thirsty, despite standing in a pool of water almost within reach of a fruit tree. Um, so I'm assuming he couldn't like reach the pool of water or something, or maybe it was salty or something. I'm not entirely sure, unless you just physically prevented from reaching it. The water always receded before he could take a drink. Yeah, I don't know if the water there is like conscious or something and deliberately doesn't want to allow him to take a drink. Anyway, so that's what's interesting though. Because they did become thirsty. So yes, in this case, in this sense, Tantalus is representative of the spaceship where they were. And I mean, despite Tantalus in Greek mythology being a singular figure, in this sense, in this movie, he is representative of this collective, the collective of the infections, that is, the infected crew. So, that's what's that's a part. Anyway, I'm not sure if many people got that. Although I mean, they could have easily got that if they searched for Tantalus. At any rate, I also know Tantalus, by the way, from Final Fantasy 9. Right? It's a very nice Final Fantasy, and the Tantalus theme there is really special. I mean, it sounds so lovely. Really, I really like it. Yeah, they're originally a troop, though. I think it's the troop that begins the game as well. I think, the beginning, just as soon as. So yeah, with regards to them, so I'm not entirely sure why they were called Tantalus. I don't think there's any direct relevance, but of course, Final Fantasies adopt a lot of mythological terminology, not necessarily many correlations with actual mythology though. So anyway, with regards to the movie itself, though, I mean, besides this, that is, uh, it's it's one of those. It's yeah. It is only slightly more interesting than zombie movies and most mundane, earthly zombie movies. I mean, it is, sure, in the end, the likes of Dawn of the Dead and such are sort of originators, I suppose. So people will sort of I don't know. Even if they watched them long ago and they watched this much later. The only thing is that I haven't seen actually anything else. Like, I mean, even Aliens is slightly different. It's not about zombies specifically. Otherwise, though, it has a similar atmosphere, sure. And for that matter, so does Jason X. Not that it's very relevant, but it's one of those. Jason X is set on a space ship as well. Not many. I don't think there's any other Jason Voorhees movies still there. But it's not very interesting that sci-fi can be. If really implemented well, sci-fi can be really interesting. And it's not at all as interesting as Moon, as mentioned earlier. Moon was more about identity and who they are, and somehow there's this thing where he finds someone. Much more interesting, such very much so. I mean, when it comes to zombies, so this is the problem. Zombies are never really very interesting. Zombies are just, obviously representative of the masses, but they don't generally tend to say anything. They just tend to, just go after, um, slightly saner humans. Yeah. So, I'm not sure how zombies have really spawned the whole genre. But, overall, though, since it's set on a spaceship, I think this makes it more interesting. So, clearly, I mean, as I said, but more than I can watch any rom-com or any high school coming of age movie, and it could easily be set in a mall or on the streets. They don't need CGI to get that. So setting zombies there doesn't exactly require much, and the background is like the background of many other movies as well, which don't have zombies, which are inevitably going to be more interesting, script wise, since zombies say nothing and most other movies say something. I'm not exactly I'm being too demanding now, am I? I wish the zombie movies would have a better script. They really don't. Unfortunately, I don't think I ever seen any interesting zombie movie. Sometimes they do have these sort of existential themes, but they don't go for long. Because zombies themselves, I mean, don't allow it. They just come barging in and such. Um, Otherwise, though, I mean, even Last Day on Mars had some questions asked. Like whether consciousness could still be present within an advanced infection, which is a good question. Um, as much as any. But I mean, it only lasted like 10 seconds. The extent of the question, and then was simply replied with it's beyond my pay grade, which isn't exactly the most interesting reply. But anyway, um, but yeah. Otherwise, I mean, you can see the usual drama between humans and how some hate others and would rather they died even if they're they're not infected or something. Others hide their infections, like in every other zombie movie. This is the thing. So wasn't like Walking Dead really popular? I haven't seen it, so I'm not sure. I mean, it cannot be much better than any other zombie movie, can it? I mean, it's just some zombie series. I think it is, but it is, isn't it? So in this case, though, I think the the, the, the cinematography was pretty good. The CGI I think was good. I mean, I don't have any complaints really. So in that on that front, I don't think it's too bad at all. It's just other than that, it's always it's one of those things where in the beginning there's a bit of talk, a bit of chat, a bit of back and forth, but then this happens and everything, and the thing, the fact that light went out many times, so a bit repetitive, but I suppose reasonable in such a context. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it's always the same thing, you get zombies coming after and then it is ultimately repetitive. So I try to concentrate on the background, but there wasn't much background in the end, and then a lot of no lighting and such. But otherwise, yeah, it's this zombie movie made in space. I guess that's pretty much it.